Time to take a coding break. Howdy, Coding Pros, and welcome back to another episode of the Coding Break podcast. I am Tam Talk, known as your medical coding coach, your medical coding instructor, as well as your reminder to take a coding break. So on this episode, I want to talk about denials. What are some of the reasons why medical claims or healthcare claims are denied as it relates specifically to medical coding? So to get a census or consensus on what is trending as far as medical coding denials, I reached out to Google AI. So pretty much what Google AI is stating as some of the main denials for coding claims or healthcare claims. The first one is missing or incomplete information. The second one is the coding and modifier error, like mismatch or incorrect modifiers or coding. The lack of prior authorization and the lack of medical necessity. So again, missing or incomplete information. So if you work as a biller or you work on denial management teams, then when I say these codes, then you will automatically recognize what these codes represent. So for the missing or incomplete information, the denial codes are CO-16 or CO-22. So what this represents is blanks in mandatory fields like patient demographics, provider identifiers, or basic diagnosis codes. The next one is, again, coding and modifier errors, which is represented by CO-4, which is for outdated ICD-10 or CPT codes, mismatched diagnosis procedure combinations, or missing or wrong modifiers. So that's why it's very important when it comes to assigning codes based on medical necessity. Again, ensuring that the codes that we are assigning, whether it be your diagnosis codes or ICD-10 codes or your CPT or procedural codes, you want to ensure that it's meeting medical necessity. And one way that you can do that is to make sure that you're using the software like Codify, that's through AAPC, and CodaPro. Those tools help you to input like the certain codes or the codes that you want to use, and to ensure that the diagnosis codes or ICD-9 codes, ICD-10 codes are considered medically necessary based upon certain payers or the governmental payers, or with just in general that they are medically necessary. In the event that they aren't medically necessary or the diagnosis or the CPT code aren't matching, this is your cue or prompt to query the physician or the healthcare provider who administered those services to ensure that you are presenting correct and medically necessary information. So our next one is the lack of prior authorization, which is represented by denial code CO-197. Again, when this pretty much is in when you're performing or providing a service and you lack the authorization from the insurance carrier to administer those services. So lack of prior authorization, there should be a team that actually contacts the insurance carrier prior to the procedure or the services being performed to obtain an authorization. And so when that claim is billed out, that authorization number should be attached to that claim so that when it is received by the insurance carrier, they are able to connect the authorization to the authorization that they provided to the facility or the healthcare provider. So yes. So the next one is lack of medical necessity. That kind of goes back into the coding and modifier, which is CO-4. But for lack of medical necessity, the billing denial code is CO-50 or CO-167. And then this represents clinical notes or diagnosis codes that fail to prove to the insurance company why this specific treatment or service was necessary. I cannot stress the importance of medical necessity. As a matter of fact, I did a YouTube video explaining how to sequence your codes, and the purpose of sequencing is to ensure medical necessity. If you're using Codify or Encoder Pro or any resource or tool similar to that, and you're not seeing that diagnosis or diagnosis code associated with that particular procedural code, or it could be the procedural code is wrong. I've seen cases where the procedure code is incorrect as well. So it is your prompt, that is your cue or prompt to query the provider who is administering that service or providing that surgery to the patient to get clarification on the diagnosis. It could be an anatomical location. It could be the wrong CPT code. It could be the diagnosis code is in the ball field, but it's not specific to the diagnosis of the patient. So it's very important that you understand medical necessity, but not just medical necessity. It's important that you understand some of the main denial categories that healthcare facilities are seeing or noticing. Again, this is according to Google AI. Again, they say that the top four, the top four is missing or incomplete information, such as patient demographics, provider identifiers, or just basic diagnosis codes. Now, with the patient demographics, you want to make sure you're mimicking that of the healthcare insurer or insurance company. Sometimes the patient may have gotten married. They may not. I've seen where the insurance company has like specific parts of the patient's name, but not the full name that the patient has. So you want to make sure the information that you have, especially the demographics, is it coincides with the insurance company, because that can trigger a denial, right? And then provider identifiers, are you associating the right tax identification, the right national provider identification number, things of that nature, just basic stuff. And then again, coding and modifier errors. Are you assigning the right modifier to the procedural service? Is a modifier even warranted? Did you forget to put the modifier on the claim? So yes, that's important. Again, then also you want to make sure the medical necessity, which is again that lack of medical necessity. Again, what we don't want to do is give the insurance company a reason to deny the claim. So we want to make sure all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. And then the lack of prior authorization. If you know ahead of time that a procedure or service requires an authorization, you want to make sure you obtain that authorization prior to the services being administered. If not, then of course it's going to, the claim is going to receive a denial because an authorization was not attached to that. So let's say you do have an authorization. You want to ensure that you are assigning it or placing it on the claim so that when it crosses over to the insurance company, they're able to match that authorization number up with what you're submitting to, so that it ensures that it was obtained. If not, again, that's another reason for denial. So it's like you have to go back and start over again. So it's very important that you're focused and you're placing good eyes on everything that's going to get that claim paid. Again, medical necessity, making sure the coding is correct, the modifiers are correct. If an authorization is required, you want to make sure the authorization is associated with that claim. And then also, last but not least, medical necessity, making sure that the services that are being provided are considered medically necessary. It may be medically necessary to a provider. It may be medically necessary to the patient. But again, is it medically necessary based on that healthcare insurance? So they have a set of rules and lists such as the NDI or, oh my gosh, I'm going to be telling myself. I'm going to leave it at the NCI or NDI, excuse me. I'm telling my age or the longevity as a medical coding professional. But yeah, so there are certain lists or rules that each insurance company has. And one of those rules is the diagnosis that they consider medically necessary for a specific procedure. So you want to ensure that you are assigning codes based on medical necessity. Like I said, sometimes it's not the diagnosis or the ICD-10 codes. It could very well be the procedural code or CPT code. So you want to ensure that everything aligns, that is pretty much just perfect. So, for example, if I am reviewing a case and it's not meeting medical necessity, I try to get all the documents that can explain or provide rationale to the reason why these particular codes were selected. So, for example, if I have to retrieve the operative report for that procedure, I want to look at the diagnosis. I want to look at the procedure code, and 9 times out of 10, the operative report will tell you if something is off. And the reason why I say that, because when someone is calling for an authorization, these are not coders. There are some who are coders, but for the most part, these individuals aren't coders. So they're going to get in the ball field when they're calling the insurance company and requesting authorizations. They're going to get into the ball field, right, of the diagnosis code or the procedure that's being performed. And they give just enough information to obtain that authorization. But that may not be what actually took place or transpired in the OR. So you want to double check, triple check to ensure medical necessity. Again, and making sure it's the right patient. Again, you're going to make sure that patient demographics are correct. Again, like I said, the provider identifiers, or if it's just basic diagnosis codes. But again, I did create a YouTube video explaining how to sequence your diagnosis codes. One, for medical necessity, and then two, just based on what was in the chart. So that's all that I have for this coding break. Is, again, just making sure that you are aware of what to look for, what is needed on a claim before it is sent out, to avoid medical coding or medical claim denials as it relates to healthcare coding. And so I also provided you with some of the codes, the denial codes to look out for. So if you're new to billing, or if you don't know their are specific codes that will kind of give an idea of why a certain procedure or a certain claim was denied. And then depending on the facility, because each facility has a different process for resolving those denials. So, for example, if there's denial codes that are specific to coding, some of those claims are triaged back to the coding department for the coder or the coding department to resolve. Some may go to wherever, but so you want to ensure that you are assigning the correct information. You're double checking, triple checking your claim before it goes out the door. So that's all that I have for this coding break. And as always, remember to code on, and in wake of all this hot weather, stay hydrated. Again, we don't want you to be the chart that we code. The cart. We don't want you to be the chart that we code. So until next time, toodles.